Hello everyone, we'll get started as we're on 10:30. Welcome to today's meeting, the Policy Resources Committee meeting, taking place on the 25th of August 2026 at 10:30, and we're taking place at headquarters in Portishead. So obviously I'm chair because I've been elected the chair and the chair of the Fire Authority chairs this meeting, but we do need to elect a vice chair as the first item of business. I haven't received any expressions of interest in advance, but I did have a quick chat with Dan. I don't know if, Dan, if you wanted to share your view on whether you wanted to carry on or not.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not seeking to stand again as Vice Chair for this term, but so hopefully another member will ably step into the role. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a fantastic experience, but I think it's probably time for a new face.
Thank you, Chair. So there are no alarms due today, but if the fire alarm does sound, please exit this room, go down the stairs, and if you go to your left, we'll meet outside and do a roll call there.
Cam Hayward, Councillor for Knoll in Bristol.
Dan Thomas, Councillor for Congsbury and Puxton in North Somerset.
Good morning, I'm Robert Payne, Councillor for Weston-super-Mare Central, North Somerset Council.
Good morning, this is Councillor Raj Sood representing Frenchy and Downland in South Gloucestershire.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Johnson, Labour Councillor for Hallfield Ward in Bristol.
Good morning, Councillor Ron Hardy, representing Emerson's Green in South Gloucester.
Good morning, everyone. Zoe Coombs, Clerk and Monitoring Officer.
Good morning, members and colleagues. Richard Welsh, Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Pensions and People.
Good morning, Alex Meanstone, Procurement.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ian Potter. I'm the Continuous Improvement Manager and HMI CFRS SLO.
Good morning, Patrick Collins, Head of Estates.
Hello, Louise Brogan, Environmental Manager.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Osborne, Area Manager, Head of Operational Response.
Louisa Roger, Culture Change Implementation Lead.
Morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Morning, I'm Verity Truscott, Statutory Finance Officer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Cook, Chief Fire Officer.
Good morning, Paula Lyons, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Service Delivery Support.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give a brief update, we do have a paper today that talks about the continuous improvement, which references His Majesty's Inspectorate and the recent inspection that we've gone through as a fire and rescue service. So obviously I won't go through lots of detail. What I will say is just high level. We had our recent inspection in June. and I'm really pleased to say that as an organisation we have improved in terms of the inspection that we've just gone through. As a result of that, His Majesty's Inspectorate has decided to take us out of enhanced monitoring, so we're back into scan, which is what all fire and rescue services are in as a standard kind of approach to the inspection process. So you'll see within that the communications that we put out publicly and internally that we've closed two of our accelerated causes of concern, one of our causes of concern, and we've got one cause of concern which remains open, but it's got a single recommendation which focuses on prevention. So I won't provide any more detail on that because we're going to cover it today in the paper from Ian Potter. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. We'll come to that. I just place on record my thanks for all the work that you and the team have been doing to sort of take on that continuous journey of improvement. I'm sure we'll get into that discussion in a bit more detail later on. I just want to remind everyone to make sure that you use your microphones when speaking and to remember to also turn them off. It's important that they're turned on so that the discussion is captured for the recording of the meeting that we're going on the YouTube channel. As we've already done, I know you're all dab hands at this now. When we're doing voting, we'll take votes against, then abstentions, and then votes for where they're required. And I think, Emma, you've just got something on register of interests.
Pick that one up. Yeah.
Okay.
So so thank you to everybody who has submitted register of interest forms, but there are some forms that just require some additional information. So before you leave, if you could just check in with Emma, it'd be greatly appreciated, so she'll be able to confirm whether we have full information or whether there's a little bit extra that we do need from you. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're now moving on to item 7, which is the minutes of the ordinary meeting, the Policy and Resources Committee meeting held on the 23rd of April 2026. Unless there are any comments on the exempt minutes, I'd like to take those at the same time, if that's okay with everyone. Are there any comments on the minutes? Okay. So I'm happy to move. Is there a seconder to approve the minutes? Councillor Thomas. Can we take any votes against? Abstentions? All votes in favour? Marvellous. Okay, and now we're moving on to item 8, which is the Local Pension Board Annual Report, and ACFO Rich Welch.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is the report of the Local Pension Board Annual Report. And members are asked to scrutinise the report and consider if further information is required to assist their oversight of this area. This is following our Local Pension Board meeting recently. This is the 6th annual report, and the report is attached in Appendix 1. I don't intend to go through the entire report. Hopefully you've read it, but I will point out a few key points. So, some of the change we've had over the last year, it's been a really busy year within the pension world. The authority's decision to strengthen the internal resources within our own internal pension team has been a great help. We have had issues with the change from our previous pension administrator into our new administrator, which was in 2024. There are issues which have been made aware of previously in members' briefings, which we asked to addressing. In addition to that, we now have a pension assurance database, which means that we should never be in the position that we found ourselves in recently, where our previous administrators have not completed the work we've expected them to complete, because that now any work that is due for completion goes into the assurance database and is followed up to make sure it is completed. So that will overcome that. We also have the oversight board now. So West Yorkshire, the scheme managers for West Yorkshire, 22 scheme managers across the UK, were not comfortable with the progress of West Yorkshire. So with the guidance of the Local Government Association, an oversight board was established. Both the Chief Fire Officer and I sit on that oversight board. I think we've got about 4 or 5 scheme managers, and we represent all scheme managers. That board meets weekly to hold our administrators to account and ensure the progress is sufficient and suitable. That weekly meeting has now moved to fortnightly, with the caveat that we will move back to weekly at any point if we feel progress is not enough. In addition to that, again, both the Chief Fire Officer and I sit on the Scheme Advisory Board for the Local Government Association, and the role of that board is to advise the Minister on the pension procedure and processes. The key part of the report really is around the risk register within the report. There are five main areas within that. The first one being the non-compliance with McLeod Sargent remedy, including RSS and immediate detriment. That risk remains a high risk because I feel we can't lower that risk until we know that work's been completed. And it is important work, so we've maintained the risk at that level, although it is stable at that level. The second one, LPB 14, is the O'Brien-Matthews, the unlawful discrimination for part-time workers. Again, high risk due to the historic data. We have got issues gathering some of that data from previous administrators and payroll, but we are working through that. Capacity of staff to deliver or loss of key staff, that risk, although it is still significant, it has reduced because of the increased internal resources within our own pension teams, which is working very well, and we are in I can assure you, we are in a much better place than we were 12, 18 months ago. Members of the LPB will understand that, very much so. 17 is the administrator's performance. Then there were concerns around resources available and capacity of the administrator. The latest update, I think they've just taken on an extra 6 or 7 pension officers. They are going through a training process, but that will ultimately result in much more work being done, so that risk is definitely being managed very well. And then the last one there is 18, the data quality and access to historic payroll information. You will be aware of the issue we've got obtaining the correct data in a usable format from Bristol City Council, and again we are working through that. But it has gone on for some time, and it is a lot of data that we're trying to retrieve from the data lake. We will get there, but it is taking time. Other than that, I don't intend to go through the entire report. If there's any questions or assurances that you might require, then I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. At this report, point 6, which covers the risks, 6.1 says from January 26th, the pension scheme risk register has been incorporated into the rate. Can you explain this a little bit more for my understanding purposes? Risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. What does it actually mean?
Sorry, where are we at?
At 6.1. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So the risk within pensions sat within our corporate risk register, but I think it's fair to say I felt they weren't detailed enough. So we now have a separate committee that meet, which is our internal pensions team, along with West Yorkshire Pension Fund, and we've created a RAID risk for that. So we can really drill down onto it, rather than having generic within the corporate risk register. It gives an opportunity to drill down into each risk, and it gives a much more detailed explanation of who owns that risk, what's being done, and any remedy that's being put in place for it. Again, more than happy to share that if you'd like to see it. If you need some bedtime reading, I'm sure. Yeah, it just gives us an opportunity to drill down more into it rather than a top-level overview.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this report? Councillor Thomas?
I was still formulating my question, actually, when it came to that. So we have a backlog in producing the ABS and the RSS. What are we looking like in terms of time frame in clearing that backlog?
So the backlog was for the 25-26 ABS. They've been completed now, but the ABS, the annual benefit statements, are due to go out by the 31st of August for this year. I met with West Yorkshire yesterday at the Oversight Board. The annual benefit statements will go out before the 31st of August, so there'll be no breach there. There are a small portion of deferred benefit remedy saving statements which won't go out. So part of the Oversight Board work we do in West Yorkshire is we have assisted them in developing a delivery plan of what is the highest priority. And the deferred benefit RSS are not there, but they will be distributed before the 31st December. And we had assurance yesterday from West Yorkshire that it won't be left until the beginning of December. They're going to work through them. So the ABS for this year will go out by the 31st. Any corrections will get made after that, so we will be avoiding having a report of breach for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Chief.
Are there any further questions on this report? Okay.
Mine, I must go to a pension meeting.
Yeah, no problem. So this report was for scrutiny, so thank you, and also thank you to our local pension board members for your work over the last 12 months as well. That's really important. We've got people that know their way around these issues with all the critical changes that have taken place. So,
thank you.
So we'll now move on to item 9, which is continuous improvement and efficiencies, and I'm going to pass over to the continuous improvement.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So just building on what the Chief Fire Officer said around the HMI inspection report that was published in June of this year. The inspection took place between November 2025 and February 2026. Very pleased to report that there's been huge progress between the last inspection and the current one. Just turning to the round 3 inspection report just briefly. So there were 4 causes of concern, 2 accelerated causes of concern, 31 areas for improvement, and we moved into that enhanced monitoring. And as a result of that, over the past couple of years, Chief Fire Officer, 1 Assistant Chief Fire Officer, usually the Chair of the Fire Authority and myself have attended meetings with the Fire Performance Oversight Group where we've been giving updates on progress. As the Chief Fire Officer has said, we have been removed from Engage around the end of June, so those attendances will no longer be required going forward. The report before you gets into a little bit more detail around that. So at 5.7, you can see the judgment grades that we've been given for each of the diagnostic areas. We've got 4 of adequate, and the remainder requires improvement. Of the 31 areas for improvement, 19 of those were closed at inspection. 12 remain open and are carried forward into the next inspection round, and we have 8 new areas for improvement. At 5.9, you'll see a broad comparison between the judgments from round 3 inspection and the latest one, and you'll see that there's been very positive movement between those. And I just draw your attention to the first one there, understanding fires and other risks, and then further in the table, promoting, embedding and improving values and culture, that have both moved up 2 grades. The movement of more than 1 grade is fairly unusual, and I think particularly the one with around values and culture is really pleasing to see. There's been a tremendous amount of work done all across the service over quite a prolonged period to improve that, and that is reflected in that latest inspection report. The inspection report, it's available online if you want to go and have a look at it. It's quite an interesting read, I think, not just the headlines that are here, but also the narrative within the report. So some things are identified that we may want to pay attention to that haven't necessarily reached an area for improvement. So we've been going through that report line by line, pulling out all of that narrative as well as the areas for improvement, and so we'll be focusing on both aspects as we go forward. In terms of the action plan development, because we don't have any recommendations, we aren't required to produce the action plan in the same way for the inspectorate. Clearly, we will still be doing so internally, and we will be sharing that with our HMI SLL as well, so the inspectorate will be aware of that. During inspection activity, engagement work ceases with our SLL. Now that that report has been published, we've recommenced that engagement work, and myself and ACFO Lyons have met with our SLL, and we've gone through the inspection report to kind of get a real understanding of where the narrative has come from. So not only have we got the report itself, we've got the perspective of the lead inspector, which has been incredibly helpful. So we've pulled all of that together into an internal document that we can then use around the action planning to make sure not just that we cover off the areas for improvement, but also things that if we don't pay attention to could escalate to that in the future. And that's being shared with our service leadership team colleagues. Well, it's been shared. We'll be talking about it in our meeting tomorrow. As a result of the huge improvements that have been made, and in order that we continue to match our resource to risk, there's been some structural realignment. So portfolio has moved into service delivery support, and ACFO Alliance has moved across into that directorate to lead, and then ACFO Welsh has come out of service delivery support and is focusing on people and pensions. Efficiencies and savings has contracted from three people to one person, and I'll be working very closely with that group manager on the efficiency work going forward, and all efficiency information and progress will be part of this report going forward at future meetings. However, there will be a full closeout report for the 2025-26 efficiency savings. Will come forward to this meeting in October to close that part off. I don't intend to go through the rest of the report. I think hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory, but I'm happy to take any questions.
I saw Councillor Hayward's hand shoot up, so we'll go to him first.
So yeah, it's very welcome that across the board there seems to be, well, mostly things moving in the right direction, but on table 5.9 there's the one area that seems to have regressed. It's this area is protecting the public through fire regulation, and I don't see that addressed at all in the report, so would you be able to expand on that, please?
Yeah, I certainly can. Sorry. During the inspection, there was an issue found with the monitoring of some enforcement notices around protection. And so there are a couple of areas for improvement in the latest inspection report. And there's also a further area for improvement around the quality assurance. So we've introduced quality assurance of the audits that are taking place. But it was the view of the inspectorate that that didn't go as far as they felt that it ought to. So there's an area for improvement there. So we were adequate. Because there were 3 areas for improvement, it took us back a judgment. What I would say is that those issues that had been identified in the inspection had already been picked up by officers in the previous November. I'd started to work on that. And there's a regular update to the Internal Improvement Board around the enforcement activity action plan that followed that being raised.
Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for the report. Really good to see the improvement in promoting, embedding and improving values in culture, which is something which is critical for every organisation. As somebody who's new to the authority, could you just give me a high-level overview of how that's been achieved?
Okay, I've got a couple of people over here who'd like to perhaps answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for your question. So I think leadership and culture has to start from the top. So I think leadership sets the direction for an organisation in terms of how we show up for each other. But also I think it's about how we show up across the organisation. So I think it has taken time, and it was always recognised within His Majesty's Inspectorate that cultural change takes time. So I think one of the focuses we've done is to bring in the Core Code of Ethics, which is a national set of ethical standards that we as officers and as firefighters across the organisation hold ourselves to account over. So that's been kind of one area. So embedding those elements that come from the Nolan principles. We've also set up a governance structure, so we've got a people, culture and leadership board that meets quarterly, and it's led by myself. I chair that board, and we've got an action plan within the PCL about how we are going to focus on improving culture across the whole of the organisation, so safe wellbeing support, communication engagement, leadership. So it's those kind of elements that link into the national improvements we've seen across the UK Fire and Rescue Service. So it's very much linking in with the national direction of travel for culture within the fire service, but also then making sure that we deliver tangible outcomes. And we are on a journey. Culture is not something you change overnight. So I don't sit here and be complacent. It's something you have to continue to nurture, and we nurture that through how we show up for each other, how we lead, how we communicate with each other, but also delivering some tangible actions, which is delivered through the People, Culture and Leadership Board, which we've got an update in today's paper specifically about culture, which Louisa will talk us through. So hopefully that gives you some answer to your question.
Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions from members? Okay. Well, in which case, obviously that time's for scrutiny. I think we note that the action plan will be coming to the next meeting of Policy and Resources Committee in October, where I'm sure we'll be able to give that a good going over and just make sure that that's going to deliver what it needs to do, and that you have the support in place that you need to ensure that we continue on our journey of improvement. Thank you. Right, I'm going to move us on to item 10, which is update on culture change, which is being delivered by the Cultural Change Implementation Lead, Louisa Roger.
Lovely, thank you. So this is to look at the last quarter against the People, Culture and Leadership Action Plan and sort of the learning and how we're progressing there. I think some of the key things that have obviously been covered is that move from the cause of concern out of the cause of concern, and those 2 points from inadequate to adequate. But we're really keen, obviously, not to sit with adequate and to keep going and keep progressing. What's really important through our People, Culture and Leadership Action Plan and the strategy is it's adaptive, so we're consistently learning from HMI recommendations and our staff through the touchpoint survey. So yeah, some of the reasons why we've moved on so much in the last year is around that governance piece, strengthen leadership visibility, greater staff engagement, and improved reporting mechanisms, as well as embedding the core code of ethics, and we're continuing to work on that. So one of the other sort of key areas is obviously the People, Culture and Leadership Programme, and I wanted to work through some of the KPIs, the ones that we're able to report on at the moment, where we can identify some change. So the engagement of the Touchpoint survey this year, we were aiming to get, I remember we talked about it before, the aim was to get sort of 50% engagement rate across each staff group, and we successfully achieved that. I think the two reasons why we managed to do that is some really focused work with on-call, so that we could engage them in the way that they wanted to be engaged and had access to the Touchpoint survey, but also to see this high engagement figures, which are between sort of 60 and close to 80% across all staff groups, means that our staff are feeling like they are feeling comfortable to engage and want to know kind of to talk to us and to tell us their feelings, so that we can work with them on what's next. The attrition rate is still low, which is good. And then in terms of some of those other statistics, at the time of this report writing, we'd only just sort of completed the Touchpoint survey, so we hadn't done the analysis yet. So that analysis will be coming to the next meeting. And then we can see going down, the other one we can report on is the proportion of staff not stating their diversity characteristics. There's been a small kind of a change in that, which is positive, but there's a sort of only partially improvement. I don't know if you remember, but last time we talked about the challenges being limited trust, low understanding of the benefits for staff, and some system issues around sort of the categorisations and transfers between HR systems. So there's some real foundational activities that are working on around updating those categories so people can see themselves identified and are more willing to sort of partake. Looking at the recruitment and onboarding process and simplifying the process, and key is providing leaders with sort of clear information and talking points. So we're working closely on that at the moment. PDRs, there's a slight sort of downtick, but that's sort of within expected tolerance levels. Welfare checks, there is a downtick in that, so a significant drop in the performance has been sort of escalated through the Strategic Performance Board, where they're looking to kind of understand what the issue is and working with our leaders to make sure that we get that back up to tolerance levels. Fitness assessments, again, within tolerance levels, and medical assessments, slight uptick. So that's, the other thing that we're doing at the moment is there's within the sort of touchpoint survey and that work around what's going to be, which is our service, our standards conversations. So understanding that we're changing and we're working on building the core code of ethics in our voice. The core code of ethics is national, but what good looks like in our voice is something that we're working on and having lots of those conversations across 30 teams across the service to build what that looks like. So we'll be able to report on a bit more of that next time also. Any questions?
Councillor Sood.
Thank you, Chair. In this report, can I draw your attention to 1.6? The overall services continue to make positive, sustained progress. And next sentence is the removal of a culture-related cause of concern. That's really good news and shows the hard work you people have done. And I just want to express my happiness on that. That's one thing. And the second thing is, if I draw your attention towards this on page 45, I think, in the table, the proportion of staff not stating their diversity characteristics. There's no changing in the disability and ethnic origin. I mean, is there any special reason for that? Why people are not disclosing the information which could be helpful for you people to develop the policies accordingly? Have we ever thought about this? Why the people are not coming forward to disclosing? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is limited trust and understanding around sort of the use of those statistics and how they can be helpful sort of throughout the, if people kind of disclose. But there is a lot of foundational work to work with leaders and individuals so that we can kind of, that they can understand and be part of that kind of progress in us of capturing that information and the importance of that information. There's been a new inclusion lead appointed just over the last sort of few weeks or month. But they're kind of going to be building a sort of a bigger inclusion team to help address some of these issues.
I hope this time, next time this will go down as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I was just quite keen to understand, I think at one point you said that staff were feeling comfortable, but then we went on to welfare checks are down. So I was just trying to understand that, bearing in mind that there are some communities within the staff that are quite small, and it made me wonder how people would come forward with issues if they did have them, and how we were monitoring that and how comfortable that would be.
So I think through the touchpoint survey, we're really happy to see that kind of number of engagement, but we're looking and analysing those figures to understand how comfortable people are with using sort of various welfare or speak out sort of mechanisms. and it's enabling us to really understand what the core reasons of those engagements are. And that sort of, and then addressing the kind of what next, how do we address that? So that is part of our process. I think that initial engagement, with merely the touchpoint survey is great, because I think it does show a bit of confidence that they feel that there's the next steps are going to be carried out. However, what we're starting to hear is there's some mechanisms that we need to focus on more, and I think we'll be able to report on that a lot more in the next quarter. We're currently sort of finishing off that analysis and then talking to our staff about what next, what we can do in the next sort of 6 months and what's going to be working there.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is that sometimes stats can give us a sort of glowing picture that's not reflecting what's actually happening for the individual on the ground. And it's a really sensitive balancing act that I think we need to, as an organisation, be aware of, because otherwise it's great to make progress, and I'm not ignoring that, but we need to still remain aware that it might not be as glowy or spectacular as the stats is indicating for us.
I think, the touchpoint survey and the work that we do going out, having sort of multiple kind of conversations, allows us to understand those nuances and is helping us to build a picture about sort of which areas that we need to focus on, and totally agree. Statistics only give us sort of one piece of the picture, but that kind of open-ended kind of conversations that we're continuing to have, and that those loops that we're making sure are in place, is giving us a much broader picture at the moment that I think we had previously. We only really had a response from 2 staff groups really that were by their computers, and the surveys now and the conversations we're broadening out, so we're getting a bigger picture that is enabling us, to really sort of effectively have a plan to work on those challenges and be adaptive with that, and that's what's really key in our strategy to do.
CFO Matt, did you?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. Data and numbers can only take you so far. We're talking about people and culture, and it's much more nuanced. So I think we need to just recognise that the touchpoint survey is a really important metric for us in terms of how many people are engaging, what are they telling us. So that kind of quantitative and qualitative metric. The piece of work that Louise is setting out on is to go around and create almost like listening circles, to have those nuanced conversations in different parts of the organisation to get a really clear understanding from a conversational perspective about how people are experiencing the workplace. I would hope that anybody that's struggling within the organisation feels empowered to speak to their line manager. That should be your first point of call, but that's not always the case, and I recognise that. We've seen that within the fire service, within this fire service. So have we got the mechanism in place that people feel that they can trust? So an independent speak up line, which we have in place, but again, building that confidence that if someone does raise a concern, that it will be dealt with appropriately. And sometimes it's perception, and we need to make sure that those perceptions are based on reality. The other piece is making sure we've got engaged staff networks. So if you're a minority member of a minority group in this organisation, and your lived experience will be different to the majority, that is how it is. So we need to create those safe spaces, and one of the things we've tried to do is to grow and nurture our staff engagement networks, so they can be a safe space for people to come and talk about their lived experience. So data takes you so far. I think my final point is that it's a never-ending journey. Culture is something that you nurture, and it will always require focus and effort, leadership, and our kind of foundation is our core code of ethics, putting our communities first, leadership, EDI, integrity, respect and dignity, and I hold those kind of 5 areas in my own practice as a chief fire officer in this organisation. So if it's that ethical leadership from the very top.
And I appreciate that very much so. And I just want to finish by saying, whatever community you are from, it's always difficult to say things are not going well.
Yeah.
And just to be mindful of that, it's not an easy thing to do. So what I don't want is for us to just assume that everything is well when it isn't. If people feel not empowered, then they can't even step forward, and then it gives a false positive.
Yeah.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come to Councillor Payne.
Thank you. I was just looking at the figures in the table for the engagement with the touchpoint survey, and it strikes me that there's quite a significant difference between the different parts of the organisation. For example, on control, there's been a big decrease, and for the on-call, there's a big increase. So I was just wondering if there is a difference between those different elements of the organisation and how it's dealt with. And also, I think on that, the 50% target does seem rather low and not very ambitious. I mean, I think we should be encouraging the vast majority of people to be engaged with it, rather than half, which doesn't really seem very, very good.
Thank you. The last in the last iteration, there was a 91% uptake from control. They were going through a big sort of cultural change at that time, and I think they really needed to sort of be part of this process. I think they've gone sort of through that process. They're in a sort of slightly better place, so maybe less got engaged for that reason. It's hard for me to sort of say that, but I think there's been a lot of kind of work to make sure that we kind of engaged. I think the figures around sort of 60 to 80% comparatively with this kind of staff survey is very good. I think this is the best I've ever seen sort of the engagement from touchpoint surveys, so we're really pleased with that, and we'll kind of continue to work towards keep on challenging ourselves to get that kind of engagement in the future.
Councillor Moss.
Thank you for the report. Do we have an indication of, because we're comparing ourselves to ourselves in previous years, of where we actually sit compared to other parts of the country? And would it be possible to actually see base numbers rather than just simply percentages? Because sometimes one or two people can make a lot of difference.
Yes, sure. In the next report, when I bring the kind of full analysis, I can bring in those numbers as well, so we've got sort of a good understanding of which numbers are in each staff groups. In terms of engagement rates in the kind of the people culture and leadership hubs that I've been part of, has been one of the highest. But I can we don't do like for like in terms of the actual questions set in the touchpoint survey. There is a plan within the national agenda to maybe look to do that, so that we can really kind of understand where you sit on some of the kind of core code of ethics questions and that kind of thing nationally, but that's not happening yet.
Just a follow up on that. Presumably they all do an annual survey of some description, so as a baseline we could see that perhaps. We can
sort of provide just the engagement figures, but maybe not the questions. But just anecdotally in the conversations, engagement's been quite high. But
knowledge of fire as well.
So within the every HMI inspection, there is a workforce survey carried out. So within inspection reports, they will talk about percentages within that service. So it's not a national comparison as such, but it would be possible to draw that information together. What I would say is that when we were going through our inspection process, we did at one point seek an extension to the time frame for gathering responses. Well, actually in the end it wasn't needed, because they came back and said that our take-up rate, which I think was in 40-something%, they consider that to be a good rate of response. So to get the percentage we have internally, it goes way beyond what they would consider as a good response. So I think that's the closest we've got at the moment to a kind of a national. Are
there any further questions on this report? I think it was just a couple of things from me. Probably useful to look at a stretch target for the touchpoint survey if we're already over 50%, but I'll leave yourselves to sort of work through that operationally. And then on the welfare checks, I think that was one of the things that really jumped out from me, because it's quite a significant drop from a quarter. Could we make sure the recovery plan gets circulated to Policy and Resources Committee members so they can look at it and ask any questions?
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 11, the 2026-27 Revenue Budget Monitoring Report as at the 31st of May 2026. Obviously, these papers were produced for the July meeting and haven't been updated, so please do, if there's anything else to share from more recent, do so.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you say, up to the 31st of May feels slightly out of date now, so I will update where I can, because there aren't significant variances reported within this paper. So this brings to you a paper which gives you the actual spending for the first 2 months of the year, and then a forecast for the full-year outturn, which is shown in Appendix 1 on page 53, and you'll see that each of the line items there are actually forecast in line with budget. So at the point in time that this paper was written, based on the first 2 months of spend, we weren't reporting any variances, because really it was just too early on in the year to do so. But I will go through a few of the more important or potential places where we might see variances as we go through. The background to this paper in section 3 on page 49 just outlines the history behind the approval of the revenue budget. So we had a budget approved in February and we updated that in March, and then we had a final approved budget on the 1st of July. And this paper compares to that 1st of July budget. So just to bear that in mind, it's the latest version of the budget that was approved. If I move on to key considerations in section 5 and to start with in income. So at the moment, as I said, no variances are reported in income, but there are a few bits to consider. So paragraph 5.3 talks about the grant income. At the time that previous budgets were presented and approved, we had limited information on some of the grants. We have received a letter on confirming 2 of the grants, which was received sort of middle of June, which confirmed the New Dimensions grant, which is what it funds our urban search and rescue capability, and also the pensions grant. So the urban search and rescue grant was confirmed in line with our budget, so no variances on that one. For the pensions grant, they only confirmed 80% of the grant at that point in time, so the last 20% hasn't been allocated yet. However, the 80% value that we've been allocated does represent 80% of the budget assumption for us. So again, no variation is reported against that line at this point in time. The final grant that we still haven't had in full information on is a protection uplift grant funding. We've been told to expect that in a subsequent letter, but still haven't received it yet. So I can't report any variance against that one because I have no more information at this point. Paragraph 5.4 talks about local remediation acceleration plan funding, which is facilitated by WECA. So it was one of the items that I put on the walk in terms of our plan for balancing the budget in a previous meeting. We expected to get some additional income from WECA as a result of this acceleration plan. At the time of writing this paper, the contract wasn't signed and finalised, but it has since been signed and finalised. So we are expecting to generate an additional income over this financial year and next financial year of around £550,000. So when the next update comes to this committee in October, based on the August outturn, you will be able to see there will be a positive variance on income and the bottom line of our budget as a result of that funding. So we're just working through how much of that will be realised in this financial year. Paragraph 5.5 just covers investment income, and really just to say that we're tracking higher than budget at the moment, but we're not forecasting to over-recover yet at this point, just because it's early days. Interest rates are higher, and we have got higher bank balances at the moment, but we are expecting those to drop as the year progresses. So it's just, we don't want to kind of bank that benefit or that upside yet, but there could possibly be an upside on investment income, so we'll continue to monitor that. Moving on to expenditure, obviously the largest part of our expenditure is pay costs, and paragraph 5.7 just outlines the Gold Book and the Grey Book pay award having been approved and accepted at 3.8%, and those have been reflected within they are built into the budget, resulting in very little variance. At the time of writing this paper, the Green Book pay award hadn't been approved. I am led to believe that it's been approved this week 3.3%. So we are expecting that to generate a slight upside because we built in some contingency and pay costs, and I think that will bring us slightly under there. So again, when we come back and report to this committee in October based on the August year to date, we should start to see a bit of an upside there in terms of the Green Book pay award coming in under our budgeted assumptions. Paragraph 5.8 really just confirms why we haven't reported any variances and non-pay costs, and it's just really to do with timing and it being very early on in the year. And the final thing I just wanted to kind of touch on was capital financing costs. So we budgeted a level of capital financing costs based on an assumed interest rate and an assumed amount of borrowing. The interest rates have gone up since we set the budget. They're now tracking sort of 5.2, 5.3% for quite short-term borrowing. So should we need to borrow, it's likely to be at a higher rate. We have managed to delay borrowing, and I'm expecting to be able to do that for another couple of months as well. So that will help to offset the increase in interest rate. I haven't banked a benefit here, but again, it's another one that I'm expecting there should be an underspend on capital financing costs for that reason. And we'll see in the next paper, when we look at the indicators, there is a calculation there that shows just under 100k based on the information I had at the time of preparing these. Obviously, things have moved on since then slightly, but I am expecting there to be an upside that we hopefully can use to help balance the budget in the future months. And I think that was all I wanted to kind of mention on this paper, but happy to take questions and appreciate that it is on quite old data.
Councillor Hooker. And Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Verity, for the reports. Obviously the figures that are presented are for just a relatively short period of time after the end of the financial year, so I can certainly understand why at this stage you would keep the year-end forecast as it is, because it's quite early to be making changes to that. There's even though it's sort of early in the year, there's an underspend year to date. And I wondered if that was kind of a real underspend, or if it's because of the processing of accruals in work in progress. Is that something which is done each month, or is that just done at year end, the capture and processing of all accruals in work in progress?
The income doesn't come in on a straight line, and we tend to receive things like the revenue support grant. We received about a third of that up front, so our income kind of has been front loaded, and then expenditure potentially not so much, so you kind of don't quite match income and expenditure as well, so you start to see an underspend earlier in the year because you've got more income at the start, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, thank you.
Councillor Moss.
Thank you, and thank you for the report, Verity. Relatively good and stress-free news over the last couple of months, which I appreciate. We're still early. Yeah, I know, sorry. I realise we're still early in the year, but I'm sure of those from local authorities know we're already seeing reporting back from Adult and Children's Services, which isn't great. Thank you for answering the question on 5.7 on the Green Book at 3.3%. We're definitely sure that's confirmed, are we, or is that just anecdotal at this point in time?
I think it is confirmed. I think we received an email this week confirming it's been accepted. No, and that's an area that we're looking at actually. So fuel, we haven't spent a lot on fuel this year to date because of fuel purchases in prior years and that kind of thing, so just timing of requirements. But it's something that we need to look at over the next few months in terms of how the increase in price will compare to how much we need to buy over that period. So it is an exercise that we're looking at, and there is a risk there. In terms of all the non-pay movements, obviously they're not showing any movements here now, but I have been looking at the July year-to-date spend with the team in the last couple of weeks, and there are variances coming through. So we are seeing some overspends as well as underspends. So we're kind of working through that, and you will get a much more kind of informative picture, I think, when we update in October.
Any further questions? Okay, well that was for scrutiny only. So we'll move on to item 12, which is back to Verity's as Statutory Finance Officer to present the capital programme update as at the 31st of May 26.
Thank you. So again, we're looking at just a very short period of time, so the first 2 months of the year in terms of actual spend, but looking at how that impacts how we would forecast the full year outturn. This paper also includes a balance sheet and then an update on the prudential and treasury management indicators as well. There are 3 appendices to this paper. Appendix 1 is on page 61, and that gives you a current view of the capital programme. Appendix 2 is a summary balance sheet, and then Appendix 3 is the update on the prudential and treasury management indicators. By way of background, in section 3 at the bottom of page 55, again this talks through the history of the approval of the capital programme. So an original capital programme was approved for the 3 years from 26-27 to 28-29 of around 38.5 million. That was subsequently revised and approved at Fire Authority meeting on the 1st of July, and the revision was just around making sure that we took into account the actual outturn from the prior year, so we didn't lose any of the spend. So it was just to make sure that the rephasing was taken into account of correctly, and that took the capital programme up to just under 40 million, with an expected spend for this current financial year of around 19 million. If we look at Appendix 1 on page 61, you can see that our current forecast outturn for this financial year is about 16.3 million. So we are already starting to see an underspend on the current year in terms of the capital programme. However, that is not an underspend against the whole programme, it is just rephasing. And I'll go through section 5 now of the paper, which talks about kind of the key movements that are contributing to that. So at the bottom of page 56, section 5, the key considerations, and premises is the first one there. Now obviously premises is a large contributing factor in terms of the overall spend for this financial year. We've got the Bath programme taking up the majority of that spend, but we also had an assumption in there around some spend on the Western refurbishment, which has been rephased. So that's one of the elements that's been rephased into later years. So not removed from the capital programme, but just with the majority of spend being pushed out into next year, which is partly why we're seeing a reduction in current year expected full year spend against the programme. Technical services, a relatively small budget discussed in paragraph 5.3, so I won't go into that in any more detail, but I will just touch on fleet in paragraph 5.4. So we've got an expected outturn of around 2 million, and at the moment, based on the March numbers, we were forecasting that to be in line with budget for the full year. The last sentence in here says it will continue to be monitored, and there's a possibility that some milestones on some of the big procurements like the Type B appliances and the rescue pumps may be delayed. I think they are going to be rephased. So the next time that you see an update, there will be a reduced spend expectation on those appliances as well, just based on the current kind of procurement timeline. So expect another rephase on the fleet programme in coming months. But the bottom of page 57 talks about balance sheet reporting and just why we do it to be in line with SIP for best practice. The balance sheet that's reported to you in Appendix 2 is just a summary balance sheet. It doesn't have all of the balance sheet categories in there. There are some notes on the side in the appendix that just explain some of the key movements. A lot of them are around year-end movements. So we're comparing the year ended the 31st of March to the 2 months and where we stand at the end of May 2026. So I won't go into any of those in more detail, but happy to take questions later if needed. And then moving on then to prudential indicators. So the indicators are something that we set as part of the budget setting process. So the prudential indicators were set at the meeting on the 13th of February. They haven't been revised since then. So earlier I mentioned that we revised the capital programme as a result of just taking into account the 25-26 outturn. We didn't amend the prudential indicators for that. So some of the variances that I'm reporting, just bear in mind they're against the original capital programme approved, not the one that we're actually working to now. So that might cause slight confusion, but I'll try and point them out. So in line with SIPFA, we can revise the prudential indicators at any time. We should look at them at least quarterly. So what we're doing here today is reviewing those indicators and then suggesting whether we think any changes need to be approved or not. So paragraph 5.12 and the bullet points within there talk about the key movements between the approved indicators and the current assessed indicators based on where we think the expected outturn for the capital programme is at the end of May 2026. So again, I won't go through them in much detail, but the key movements really are the fact that we've got a reduced spend, a reduced expected spend for the current year, which drives, therefore, a reduced borrowing requirement. It reduces capital financing costs and things like that. So we can see in Appendix 3, the movement column at the end really just shows you some of those key movements, and they are all linked to the fact that either there's a delay in the spend, so we're borrowing less, and the costs of that, therefore, are reducing. There's also an adjustment on the IFRS 16 numbers, and that's all to do with the calculations we make to bring leases onto balance sheet as part of an accounting standard requirement. We made some assumptions when we set the budget because we hadn't gone through the year-end process at that point, and it's just refining and aligning those. And it's because there were some differences between the way we treated some of the Bath temporary site costs and bringing those onto as revenue through IFRS 16 rather than as capital, which is why we've got some variances there. However, having said all that, there are some variances, but paragraph 5.13 just talks about the fact that despite the fact that we've got variances, they're all moving in the direction of reductions rather than increases. So we're not currently expecting a breach or reporting a breach against any of the approved indicators. And for that reason, we are not recommending any of these are reapproved at different levels. It's just to bring to you an awareness that they've been reviewed and we still think they're appropriate to manage our capital spend and profiling for this current financial year. The last couple of paragraphs in section 5 on page 59 just talk about really the kind of continual monitoring of the capital programme to make sure that we take into account the impact that might have on the revenue budget and the borrowing position, and also just a kind of continual review to consider rationalisation and the most effective way of using our finances, kind of acknowledging that the capital programme is significant and it puts a significant pressure on our current revenue budget as well. So the capital programme continues to be reviewed regularly to make sure that we're utilising our borrowing as effectively as possible. That was all I was going to say on that paper, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Verity, very thorough as always. Are there any questions from members? Stunned into silence. Okay, well, we'll be getting future updates, including one in October, which I think will have some of that more granular detail you referred to, just as the picture improves. So we'll continue to scrutinise it there. Right, we'll move on to item 13, which is the Annual Environmental Report 25-26. It's been presented by Environmental Manager on behalf of the Head of Estates, Louise Brogan.
Hello, thank you. You've all read the report, so I'll just give you a quick run through. The last financial year we did make some positive improvements in many areas across the service. However, we did not achieve our carbon emissions target, which was 58% reduction. We did achieve 55%. Section 5.1 below kind of explains that. A lot of that was around fleet, and we had some F gases as well, which were purchased by fleet, which we hadn't had to purchase for about 3 years due to their efficient use generally. They have a really high carbon emission conversion factor, so that added 16 tonnes to our emissions, which without that we would have been about 56%, which wasn't too far off our target. We did have some really good energy monitoring processes put in place as well. We saved about £7,500 and 31,000 kilowatts of energy, which is really good. And this year going forward, because we're refining that at the moment, as we go into the next heating season, hopefully we'll be able to save even more there, which will also be reflected in our emissions and our net zero targets. Although we did reduce the litres of fuel used by about just over 4,500 litres last year. The diesel emissions factor does rise every year, which does mean then that regardless of how much we reduce, it's always going to keep going up, unfortunately. So that is something that we'll be factoring in going forward. And as much as we try and reduce it, it will have an impact. We are looking at introducing HBO, which has been trialled on and off, and we're still going ahead with that. Fuel consumption did account for 96% of our reported emissions, scope 1 and 2, and the energy used in the estate is largely offset due to renewables. If you look at the graph below, I've added this year the actual emissions, because normally we just report on scope 1 and 2, and because of that offset with the renewable energy, it does look like that it is solely fleet that is producing emissions in the service, and it's not really a full picture. So we've added that additional line with the actual emissions so that we can see that even when we do reduce energy use within the service, that will still hopefully come down, even though it's not reflected in the actual reporting due to the offsets. We have regular involvement with sustainability groups, which helps to demonstrate our leadership, our environmental leadership in the service, and that's in Bristol and North Somerset, as well as a national group. And we've just recently re-implemented the EMS review meetings, so we have better oversight of our environmental management system, which covers all of our environmental compliance and the aims within the strategy, which are all kind of listed here. So going into the key principles of the strategy and the aims and any progress that's been made over the last year. So we've achieved quite a lot of them. The strategy is in review at the moment, and we will be looking at implementing some new aims where the current ones have been achieved. So I'm not going to kind of go into all of those. There's a couple that are still ongoing, but most of them have been achieved as far as the estates goes. And for renewable energy, we're still looking at more robust monitoring in order to make the most of our renewables on site, but most of those have been achieved as well. As far as cleaner transport and travel goes, we have got electric vehicle infrastructure throughout the estate, so that's been achieved. And a lot of the fleet vehicles are now low emission. However, we haven't quite achieved that aim, and we're still working on that one to try and bring down the emissions of the fleet outside of the kind of the HGVs and the appliances. As I mentioned earlier, we are still looking at hydro-treated vegetable oil as an additional way of bringing down those emissions. It says here Appendix 1, but it's actually 5.17, so excuse the typo there. So that, I'll give you an update on that in a second. We are currently aligned with the Environmental Protection National Operating Guidance. We have achieved that, however, we do have noticed a gap, and we're not entirely we don't have full oversight on ensuring that that is quality assured. So going forward, that's our next steps into the next year to figure out how to do that, and working with control to do so. Sustainable procurement in practice is on track and has been achieved. Next steps for that are we're looking to working with procurement to add additional weighting in some of the contracts so that we have better oversight on the scope 3 emissions that come from the procurement and supply lines. And under ambitious environmental management, we are aligned with ISO 14001. We aren't officially certified, but we have we're currently in the process of being audited by our internal auditors, so that we can make sure that we are remaining aligned with that ISO standard. Some additional points that are outside of the strategic aims. So estates performance, generally the estate continues to reduce most of its energy across the board. As I said, we've got some new monitoring processes in place which hopefully will continue that downward trend. We have also got some new improvements around LED lighting, and we're currently reviewing how else we can decarbonise the estate over the next couple of years. Fleet fuel use is the main, as I've said, the main issue with emissions for fleet, And although quite a lot of progress has been made, this year may be different because we've had quite a lot of instances where we've been supporting other areas, and therefore that increases our fuel use. And we're going to be looking at how we can maybe monitor that and capture that going forward, so we can record where the difference is between fuel that's been used within our service and fuel that's been used supporting others. HVO trials were put on hold due to the fuel prices going up, and we needed to fill all of our fuel bowsers and tanks with diesel. However, that is currently just about to be restarted again with the next stage of the trial. So hopefully by next year I'll be able to tell you how that's gone and whether we've managed to reduce our emissions through that. Other improvements, the salary sacrifice scheme for electric vehicles was relaunched last year, and we've had a 100% increase in staff take-up since then, and we are continuing to push that forward and see if we can encourage staff members to take up electric vehicles. And yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free.
Any questions? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Very interesting as ever. Just a quick question. The auxiliary vehicles we use, so for example the small vehicles to get on-call fire service personnel from one station to another, are they electric now, or are they still traditional fuels?
It's a bit of a mix and match at the moment. Some of our pool vehicles and those vehicles are electric, some of them are petrol, some of them are now hybrid. So we are working with Fleet to put a bit of a plan together so that we've got a strategy for replacing those. It's not always viable for them to be electric, so it's about what's best operationally, as well as how we can reduce our emissions as well.
Councillor Payne.
Yes, thank you. Can I just ask about the HVO? Can you tell me why the price has gone up along with the traditional fuels? Because the point was that it's supposed to be separate. And also, why do we need to secure an alternative supplier? Was there a problem with that?
I don't have all of the details on that one, but I can tell you what I know so far. So the price did go up at the same time as the diesel prices went up across the country.
Sorry, can you just pop your mic on?
Oh, sorry. So the price did go up alongside diesel prices. They didn't go up as much. It is just about markets, as far as I'm aware. I don't have the actual figures. You'd have to ask Fleet about the actual figures for that one. But they didn't go up as quickly, and they were more stable. So they're not fluctuating in the same way diesel's fluctuating. And there was HVO. I think we had a new procurement process for fuel, and I don't think it was just our service. I don't know. Alex might be able to help with that one. And HVO wasn't initially included in that tender, so from what I understand. So going forward, that has now been, the supply for that is being looked at separately, so that should be back.
It'd be helpful if that information could be circulated, that you need to go and get up to all the committee members. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Sood.
This is a very good report to read it. I know our carbon emissions have gone up due to the reasons you have explained it. But my question is a bit long term, maybe difficult to answer. The government will try to achieve net zero by 2030. Is it achievable in your terms? Do you reckon we will achieve it, or we are just off the mark? Thank you.
The national targets are 2015 now, so our targets for 2030, as it stands, we're probably not going to achieve that. Lots of, as you probably all know, working in local authorities, lots of our councils are moving their targets slightly. What we're hoping to do is review that over the next couple of years, celebrate where we have got to by 2030, and then set more stage targets going forward. So by 2035, maybe reduce the scope 1 and 2. Yes, possibly.
Any further questions? Councillor Hayward.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously meeting those targets is always going to be challenging. But I guess I guess to meet those targets, you need buy-in from across the organisation. It can't just come down to you or your team. It's everyone needs to be playing their part. To what extent do you feel like you are getting that buy-in? Or to flip that question, do you find there's areas where you're getting resistance to? You don't need to name the area specifically, but is that? Do you find that's a factor in your work? I guess is what I'm asking.
No, I don't find there's resistance. I think obviously budgets are a challenge, and the nature of the fleets that we have is always going to be a challenge and our biggest problem to overcome. So I think everybody that I speak to is on board with environmental improvement, particularly after the summer we've had. I think it's very obvious that we need to be looking at from climate change and how we can be improving as a service. So there aren't any challenges from that perspective. I think it's purely a budgetary and operationally how technology hasn't caught up with where our targets were, and things have moved on since 2020 when we set those targets, and so we'll be looking to review them.
Any further questions? I'll just do a follow-up there, because I was quite struck by what was said in 5.17, and one discussion we previously had was about accessing funding through the Clean Air Zone for replacing some of our vehicles. I just wonder if you could say a bit more about where that has got to. I was aware there was discussions ongoing, but can you say any more?
That's actually sitting with Fleet, so I don't have an update on that one, I'm afraid. I don't know if Verity might.
I might be able to have a little bit. I don't know. I get it, as Louise says, it is being dealt with Fleet, but it's something that I've been looking at over the most recent months is updating the capital programme. So when we built the capital programme, we didn't assume any receipt of that funding, although we knew there was a potential on the horizon. So I've been looking at how the impact of that funding and the benefit on the capital programme. So we are expecting to receive some funding for, and I don't, certain types of appliances. I don't want to get the types wrong and the numbers wrong, but there is some specific detail behind that around certain appliances and around 80% funding to support the purchase of them. But it's not all appliances. It was a kind of discrete group. And I think coming to a future Policy and Resources Committee meeting will be the business cases to procure them, and that will detail the expected offset in terms of Clean Air Zone funding that we should be achieving. So it is in progress, and it is something that we're expecting to achieve and receive.
I think, like all of us, we're looking forward to seeing more information on that come through. Cool. Okay, so that item was also for scrutiny, so I will move us on to make sure that's scrutinised. So item 14 is to agree and monitor the procurement forward plan as of the 17th of August 2026, and the procurement supplies officer will be presenting. Alex Mainstone.
Thank you very much. This is just the procurement forward plan for all spend over 250,000 for potential procurements coming up. It's pretty much as it was before, but anything in yellow is procurements that are being worked on at the moment and are likely to come to the committee for future authorisation. But not much change really.
Any questions? Okay, well, I'll move us on. Thank you for that item. So now we're going to move on to item 15, which is the 6 monthly update on the control system implementation and the area manager head of operational response. Matt Osborne will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'll begin on page 79 of your packs with a summary position. As a reminder that this project is replacing the command and control system we use in the fire control room. It's an operationally critical system because it supports the management of emergency incidents and the mobilisation of our resources to emergency incidents. The headline position is that the project is currently rated green. It remains within the approved financial programme and is tracking between a week and 10 days ahead of the contracted completion date. Since the last update provided, the key milestone of solution design has been completed and accepted, and the planned system go live date remains as November 2027. Some background information on page 80 of your packs. It may be helpful to clarify that the command and control system we're updating is separate to the 999 system we use to receive emergency calls, two separate systems. current system we use is called Vision 4. It's been in service since around about 2017, and it's hosted internally within Avon on our own hardware, on our own servers, and it's getting to the position where it is outdated. It's come towards the end of its supported life cycle. So this project is moving us towards Vision 5, provided by NEC Software Solutions. And with Vision 5, rather than us hosting the hardware, the servers, the internal infrastructure, we will be on the NEC data centers. There'll be 2 data centers. So there's resilience in that, because if one data center fails, we have resilience of transitioning immediately to another. So in terms of where we are now, this will transition us to a more modern, secure and resilient arrangement. Section 4 of your pack, also on page 80, references financial implications. Just some further information to what's contained in the report. The contract value is approximately 4.8 million, and that is a 5-year contract with an option to extend for a further 2. The total cost of implementation between now and November 2027 is approximately 2.5 million. Okay. We have to date paid approximately 1.2 million. We pay when key milestones are met, and we have approximately 1.3 million more to pay between now and November 2027. Post November 2027, when we go live, 3 years remaining on the contract. It's just over £700,000 a year in the maintenance, the ongoing support. So we'll have a further 2.1 million to pay. When we combine the implementation costs with the extra 3 years, we get our circa 4.8 million cost. There is no additional funding being requested. We are within that financial framework. Moving on to section 5, some key considerations for you to note. As I previously mentioned, since the last update, the solution design milestone was completed. This included the detailed process of our team working with NEC's software engineers to agree how the new system will be configured, which provides the baseline for NEC to do their build, configure, and then to work out what the testing arrangements need to be, so that we meet the approximately 1,400 elements that were in the initial procurement spec. There's a lot of work there arranging now over the next 12 months what that testing system looks like to make sure we've achieved everything we set out to achieve when we initially went to procurement. The contracted delivery date for the design solution phase was the 16th of June. We received a request from NEC to extend that by a short period as they had capacity issues. But I can report that the work was completed and formally accepted on the 1st of July, so approximately a 2-week delay. Important to note is there were no increases in cost. There's no subsequent delay in achieving any of our milestones, and there's been no material impact. I can also report that we didn't pay on that milestone until the work was completed and accepted. The contract requires implementation within 24 months, which leads us to a completion date of 10th of November. And the next planned milestone is delivery of the training and reference environment. We're due to achieve that by December 2026, and we are on course to achieve that milestone. I just want to reference paragraph 5.9 now, which refers to governance arrangements, and previously this report was sent to the Audit, Governance and Oversight Committee. The reporting route has since been considered against the authority's constitution, and future reports from today onwards will be to this committee. Section 6 on page 82 references risk. There are 2 significant risk indicators identified, which are managed through our internal corporate risk framework. First one being 6.1, which is failure of command and control mobilising system. That refers to our current Vision 4 system we're using here today. Of course, this project is to take us to a more modern, reliant, resilient system. There are some inherent risks with our current system because it is aging. That risk is managed through corporate risk 6.1, corporate 6.6, corporate risk 6.6 is around the delivery of this project. And bring to your attention that in the coming data cleansing and testing activities, we've noticed in the project timeline a potential risk in terms of capacity. So service leadership team meeting July last month, and tomorrow I'll be able to discuss options to provide more specialist resource capacity within the team to make sure that risk is mitigated and managed. We've got time to work on that. It's not now, it's forward planning and make sure that risk is managed well in advance. Chair, the presentation report, and I'll take the question.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Johnson.
Apologies in advance because I may not have understood completely, but I just wondered, it sounds like you're saying that we're on track, we don't need any more money invested in it, and I'm just wondering, is there a point when it will be paid off, and if we ever arrive at that point, how long will this system be viable for us in place? Because obviously technology is changing at a rapid rate, so I'm just wondering its longevity.
Thank you, Councillor. The current contract is 5 years from when we began in November 2025. So when we go live in November 2027, we're 2 years into that 5-year contract, giving us effectively 3 years of using this product. We have the option of a 2-year extension. So towards year 5, I would suggest, we'll be reviewing the effectiveness of that product all the way through. Certainly around about year 4, we'll be needing to consider whether we continue that product that hits our needs or go to the market for replacement. There's that mechanism to work effectively and efficiently support our needs to trigger a 2-year extension. If it's not, then we have a flexibility to look elsewhere on the market.
So, is this something that's going to be perennial, like we'll have to update every 5 years or pay this kind of money out again?
But I would suggest it will be an ongoing cost. And what we're seeing is this type of product where at the moment we have an internally hosted system where we have our own infrastructure, our own hardware, we manage it ourselves. The market is transitioning towards hosted services. So, Verity, correct, I don't want to talk money, but I'll attempt it. Instead of us having capital expenditure to purchase hardware and that sort of infrastructure, cost transitions to revenue budget in terms of it's a cost of a service that we're buying annually. I think the benefit of 5+2 gives us that flexibility, because as you quite rightly mentioned, Councillor, technology moves at a rapid rate, and I don't know whether we'll be in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time. This gives us flexibility to adjust with it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, well, thank you for the update. It's good to see that things look like they're going to be on time, on budget, which is always good news, I think, for councillors, because we know with IT systems or anything involving cloud can sometimes be very tricky. Yes, I'm sure we've all got from our own councils projects in our minds where there have been challenges. So that was for scrutiny and noting the key updates, including the milestone that's been met. So I'll now move on to item 16, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be Tuesday the 13th of October 2026 at 10:30 here at headquarters in Portishead. So item 17 is the exclusion of the press and the public. To resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972 and as in accordance with Schedule 12A Part 2 Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public interest in maintaining exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information, and that relates to the confidential minutes we've already approved, Bath Fire Station redevelopment update and the Severn Park PFI update. Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Thomas, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hardy. All those votes against? Abstentions? Votes for?